far beneath the Earth's surface, deep on the ocean floor. One landmark continues to fascinate above all the rest.
We had no connection to land, but we knew that we were 2.5 miles directly above a very significant gravesite.
Its tragic tale has been told many times.
And it was just a horrendous story of everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
But there is another story, an ongoing technological drama, a high-tech adventure to discover and explore the mysteries of the RMS Titanic.
Titanic was sort of this lost mythical thing, but then it suddenly wasn't.
This is that story, a quest marked by failure, success, classified operations, and moral uncertainty. 90 years after the loss of 1,500 souls, the story continues to this day. In the summer of 2001, imaging researchers from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts returned to this extraordinary wreck site aboard Russian submersibles. The latest challenge, fine-tuning underwater high-definition cameras to capture Titanic in a clarity yet to be seen. The story of Titanic and the story of ocean technology are inseparable. Titanic serves both as inspiration, daring scientists to create new technology, and as a proving ground for their latest equipment and instruments. This is the story of those people, the amazing gear they develop, and the almost insurmountable challenges they face.
I'm hoping that the resolution and quality of the high-definition systems that we're using will really bring the experience, the feeling that you're actually there.
There's a lot of science that can be done on Titanic. We know that the day that it hit the bottom of the ocean. So we can study the impact of Titanic on the seafloor. We can study the kinds of animals that have made Titanic their home.
But there is a paradox to this mysterious place. The closer technology brings us, and the clearer the picture, the more we become enveloped in its mysteries. By the late 1990s, anyone with a spare $36,000 can rent a Russian submarine, one of the handful capable of reaching Titanic's great depths. The two Mir submarines regularly take the trip 2.5 miles down. That's 36 football fields or 9 Empire State Buildings. Today, it's all become rather routine. Of course, as any submersible pilot will tell you, one minor breach in the hull could mean that your head is about to be squashed like a tomato.
Whenever we do see little drips, and we do see them, the first thing you do is taste it. And hopefully it tastes like fresh water, which is just condensate within the sphere. If it's salty, then you definitely have a problem.
Working in 6,000 pounds a square inch, which really is the analogy of if you were to balance 2 double-decker buses onto a thumbnail, that's the equivalent local displacement of that pressure.
Woods Hole is in the science business, not the shipwreck business, so they take a hands-off approach to the site. They play no part in the salvaging of artifacts, a for-profit business that began back in 1987. The exhibitions of those artifacts feed the ever-growing epidemic of Titanomania and the legions of self-proclaimed Titanic fanatics. Their numbers grow in 1997 with the release of one of the largest grossing films of all time, itself a marvel of technology and special effects. But Titanic is more than a trendy curiosity about a tragic event in history. It's a cautionary tale about blind faith in technology. Even the ship's captain was dazzled by state-of-the-art shipbuilding.
Captain Smith said, "I cannot imagine a situation that would cause a modern ship to founder. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that."
People in Victorian England came to trust in these wonderful scientific achievements. They put their reliance on the designer, on the builder, much as we do today.
April 10th, 1912. A festive atmosphere meets the passengers as they embark on the RMS Titanic, the vessel they call the Wonder Ship. I saw what seemed like a huge building, passenger Edith Russell recalls. 11 stories high, with tier upon tier of glittering electric lights dressed over all.
For some reason, the Titanic takes center stage. I think it's because World War I had not happened. There was this period of time just before the war, sort of a magical time, almost the time of a Camelot, if you will.
Nicknamed the Millionaire's Special, the ship is known for its first-class appointments and opulent surroundings. Few remember that it is registered as an immigrant ship.
In third class, there were something like 24 nationalities. Almost the entire spectrum of humanity was represented on board the Titanic.
Many personal treasures are loaded on the ship, destined never to complete the crossing from Southampton, England to New York. Second-class passenger Stuart Collette is entrusting his Bible to the baggage hold, though. His brother tells him to keep it with him for good luck, and he survives. This is the Gilded Age, a time of incredible progress. Most of the people on the Titanic can remember a time without electric lights, telephones, automobiles. It seems that humans could conquer anything, even the waves of the ocean. It didn't seem unusual to label a ship unsinkable.
The words first appear in the pages of a very prestigious British shipbuilding journal, which in describing these watertight bulkheads said that the captain could move a switch, close the watertight doors, and make the vessel, quote, virtually unsinkable, unquote. Well, the popular press picked up on that phrase, and they managed to delete the word virtually, and so the unsinkable ship was born in the minds of the public.
The ship's owners never call Titanic unsinkable, but the crew and passengers take it as gospel truth. Their confidence is further assured by a recent innovation on board, Guglielmo Marconi's wireless telegraph. But two-thirds of the way into their journey, as they are unwittingly speeding toward a field of massive ice formations, their faith and their lives are to be shattered forever. The mighty bow of the Titanic, with its dripping rusticles, has become an icon of the last decade of the 20th century. In the 21st century, we can marvel at it through the latest in high definition, pictures with a wider screen and twice the resolution of regular TV. Just looking at the ghostly wreck brings back the violence that occurred here. It is April 14th, 1912. The radio operators receive numerous Morse code warnings from other ships in the area about ice flows and icebergs. One transmission from the nearby steamship Californian is stifled by Titanic's chief wireless operator Jack Phillips. "Shut up," he tells them. "I am busy." At 11:40 p.m., the largest ship on the ocean, 46,000 tons, going 25 miles an hour, scrapes against the largest natural moving object in the world.
The worst thing that could be imagined was a puncture in the ship's hull, so the Titanic was built to withstand that damage, and as a matter of fact, could even withstand the flooding of 4 compartments in the forward part of the ship. Unfortunately, on the night of April 14th, 1912, there were 6 compartments that were open to the sea, and that doomed the unsinkable ship.
Just after midnight, Captain Smith gives the order to ready the lifeboats. The sea temperature is 28 degrees, and there are only enough lifeboats for roughly half of the 2,200 people on board, and even those go out partially filled. The unsinkable ship dips below the waves at 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, 1912. It breaks into 2 pieces and plunges over 2 miles to the floor of the Atlantic. More than 1,500 souls are lost.
Imagine, if you will, a supersonic jet filled with the most famous movie stars, the wealthiest people in the world, the owners of big business, and suppose that that jet were to crash. That's pretty much what happened with Titanic.
I would really relate the Challenger, loss of the Space Shuttle Challenger, to the loss of the Titanic, where we sort of put a little too much faith in our technology and it bit us.
Almost immediately after the sinking on April 15, 1912, people start speaking about locating and possibly raising the Titanic.
Vincent Astor, John Jacob Astor's son, was very interested in recovering his father's body, and he wanted to put together an expedition to go out there for that purpose, and his body was recovered, and so he abandoned that idea.
Over the years, all kinds of plans are made to raise Titanic, involving everything from electromagnets to ping pong balls.
It was comical. And naturally, none of that would work. I mean, they forget to take into effect that if you take a ping pong ball just 10 feet underwater, it crushes, so let alone 12,000 feet.
Even if these ideas were possible, first the wreck had to be located. Unfortunately, the navigation methods in use at the time involve calculating the ship's speed in relation to the position of the stars. We know today that the ship's last reported position is nearly 14 miles off.
Which can be explained by a confusion in changing the time zone, changing clocks. And so the most important fix of the navigation officer of his career, the most important fix for the captain of the ship to confirm, they actually flubbed and sent everybody to the wrong place for the rescue.
There are few serious scientific attempts to locate Titanic. Then in the 1970s, Robert Ballard, a young scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, sets a unique goal. He and his colleagues decide to use their developing technology to solve the greatest maritime mystery of all time.
Very, very early on, I knew that one of his goals was to go out there and see if he couldn't find it, while at the same time, obviously, testing the technology that he was working so hard on.
The plan blossoms in 1977 when the Alcoa Corporation lends their salvage vessel, the Sea Probe, to the institution. The ship features a huge pipe apparatus that can send instruments 3,000 feet into the ocean.
I went to Westinghouse Corporation, I bought a deep-towed sonar system. I went to the Navy and bought a big lighting system. And I borrowed about $600,000 worth of equipment to put on the end of the Alcoa Sea Probe.
But inexperienced boat hands incorrectly fasten the pipe. The mistake is not realized until they begin towing operations a few days out of port.
All of a sudden, the pipe broke, everything went, and the counterweight came running down right towards us, because we were in a room underneath all that, and hit it. And then we ran out, and everything was gone.
The 1977 accident sends Ballard and his team at Woods Hole back to the drawing board. They would not mount another expedition for Titanic for nearly a decade. In the meantime, another character emerges in the search for Titanic, charismatic Texas oilman Jack Grimm.
Why was it going through iceberg-infested waters? That's one of the answers that we hope to find when we reach the Titanic.
He had an absolute I-can-do attitude, and if you wanted a partnership to look for the Titanic, you wanted a risk taker, because this was big, risky business.
In the late 1970s, Grimm, known for his searches for the Loch Ness Monster and Noah's Ark, announces that he is going to find Titanic. He enlists two major players in the oceanographic scene, Fred Spiess of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in California, and Bill Ryan of Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Geological Observatory.
Grimm wanted to look for it right away, and there was no existing equipment, unscheduled, available to him. So we'd have to build all the technology from scratch.
The first Grimm expedition leaves Florida in mid-July 1980. Grimm funds the development of Seamark, a sophisticated new sonar system.
And I was convinced they were going to find it. It wasn't that big a search area. I just figured I was going to read in the news they found it, and that was the end of that.
The Seamark is a side-scan sonar which creates a beam of sound. What makes Seamark so revolutionary is the width of its beam, 3 miles across. But the trade-off for being able to survey that much area is that Seamark's results are not detailed enough to define a wreck site versus a natural marine formation. GRIM targets 14 areas that might be the final resting place of Titanic. But plagued by stormy seas and equipment problems, GRIM is forced to head back to port on the 17th of August, 1980. GRIM's next voyage is planned for the following year, 1981. This time, they bring a more finely tuned sonar system called Deep Tow that shows smaller objects. The team travels 900 miles into the North Atlantic and begins to survey the search area and the 14 targets identified the previous year that lie in it.
We concentrated with the Deep Tow instrument of the Scripps Institution, and so we picked all those targets in between and checked them off one by one.
They examined 13 of the 14 targets. Then disaster. The winch that launches and retrieves Deep Tow breaks before they can finish their survey. Under that final target, Titanic.
Did we find the Titanic? That's a question lots of people ask us. I think you could say we beautifully imaged the gravesite of the Titanic. We beautifully imaged the landscape. But until you have some identifier, these are just acoustic targets.
With just hours left on the mission, the winch is repaired. GRIM asks Ryan to deploy another piece of equipment that he had financed, the Deep Sea Color video system. This vehicle was meant to shoot video of Titanic if they found it. It can't send images to the ship, but does record them for later viewing. On the 4-day journey back to shore, the search party looks at this videotape.
And then the instrument pulls up off the bottom, and in view comes these big curved object. My reaction is, oh, we've hit a huge glacial boulder. And GRIM shouts out, the propeller!
It would take 2 more years until a third GRIM expedition could be planned. The 1983 mission fails to confirm the alleged propeller again.
I think we were all a little intimidated by, if they went out there and weren't able to find it, maybe it wasn't findable.
But as GRIM's team sails back to port for the last time, another expedition was already in the planning. On September 1st, 1985, Robert Ballard and the Woods Hole team are on the verge of the greatest discovery in maritime history. This is the Titanic debris field as it exists in the 21st century. Scattered on this muddy foundation lie items that mark over 2,200 lives. Did the unsinkable Molly Brown order this Clicquot champagne at a stiff $3.50 a bottle? Did William Stead eat soup from one of those bowls as he discussed his scheduled speech at Carnegie Hall? Did Father Biles use this bench to stand on as he gave scores of people absolution in their final moments? So many passengers and the daily items they used. But as recently as 1985, these objects were hidden by the Atlantic's cold darkness, waiting for someone to find them. After the flamboyant Texas oil man Jack Grimm fails to find the Titanic in 3 separate expeditions during the early 1980s, the media dubs the entire affair Grimm's fairy tale.
Jack Grimm left a major contribution to science, a major legacy, this fabulous equipment that we used on many, many expeditions to essentially illuminate the ocean floor for the first time.
But while Grimm is pursuing this so-called fairy tale, the scientists, engineers, and technicians at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution are working on a concept they're convinced will open the mystifying ocean floor to the world. They call it telepresence, bringing video cameras to the depths of the ocean. By 1982, the Office of Naval Research contributes $2.8 million for the development of this telepresence system, particularly the Argo camera apparatus, named after the mythical ship that carried Jason and the Argonauts in their search for the Golden Fleece. To test Argo, they have their own Golden Fleece, Titanic, but the funds still aren't enough to mount an expedition.
So then I went deeper into the Navy. And being a naval officer and having been involved in a lot of programs, I went to the other side of the Navy, the more classified side of the Navy, and I talked to them.
I wasn't in the room, but I doubt the Navy called Bob Ballard up and asked him to go find the Titanic. It was his dream, it was his goal, and he convinced them, as we were doing other work for the Navy, that we should be able to take some of our time and go attempt this difficult task.
The Cold War is still raging, and Argo can help the Navy with two separate problems. Two sunken submarines, one called the USS Thresher, sunk due east of Woods Hole in 1963. The other is the USS Scorpion, which sank just 5 years later, 400 miles southwest of the Azores off the coast of Portugal. The Navy wants Dr. Robert Ballard to use the new technology to monitor the nuclear stability or instability of those sunken subs and their nuclear reactors.
So the Navy said, look, we want you to go find the reactors. We want you to completely map them. We want to find every square inch of these submarines. And that became our classified mission, secret mission.
With additional Navy funding, Woods Hole engineers and technicians start bringing Argo to life in 1982. This 4,000-pound cage the size of an automobile, filled with 3 specialized dark vision cameras and sonar, will be a leap ahead in deep-sea imaging.
In some cases, depending on the type of vehicle, you may be power limited into the amount of light that you can bring. So usually we use very low light or very high sensitive camera systems for imaging in the deep sea.
In 1984, Argo sees its first action in a secret mission to the USS Thresher.
The Thresher was just destroyed. It was just like passed it through a shredding machine. We knew where it was because they'd visited, but they had never mapped it. They just went down and looked around. But they'd never done a systematic search. They never found the reactor.
Having found all of the remains of the sub, Ballard wants to push farther out into the Atlantic to find Titanic. But there is another hurdle. Woods Hole is a science institution, and its management isn't convinced that finding the Titanic or any shipwreck is the best use of its resources.
First of all, they're hazardous. They tend to be covered and festooned with nets and cables and things that are entanglement hazards. And then secondarily, from a research standpoint, they're not the best subject matter.
It was not that they were passive. They did not want me to do it. And so that was tough.
Ballard persuades the institution that finding Titanic will be a high-profile way to test their new technology. In addition to the funds from the Navy, Ballard seeks a partnership with the European counterpart to Woods Hole. The French Institute for Research and Exploration of the Seas, or IFREMER, joins the effort. They come up with a two-pronged attack. The first leg of the voyage gets underway on June 24, 1985. IFREMER scientist Jean-Louis Michel begins the search for the Titanic. He will employ his new sonar acoustique remorqué, or towed acoustic sonar.
The SAR is a side-scan sonar. That means the sonar is flying not far from the bottom, about 400 to 500 feet from the bottom, and the SAR could dive to 20,000 feet. And it was brand new for that.
The plan was the French sonar system called SAR would find the wreck, and then we would go photograph it.
Ballard and the Woods Hole scientists joined their French colleagues on board the French research vessel La Syrah on July 22, 1985. The party steams to the search site and deploys the SAR directly over Jack Grimm's unchecked target. As it is on its way down, SAR's onboard metal detector goes crazy. The current is strong though, and the ship gets pushed away from this small section of the ocean. Without sonar confirmation, they assume the metal detector needs adjustment. Jean-Louis Michel decides to check out this area at the end of the cruise.
He now continually moved away from the Titanic and had a chance now. That's fate. He never had enough time to go back and get that final missing sliver. And I'll never forget coming back. I felt like Grimm, I felt like Ryan, I tasted defeat. It's not very nice taste.
The Titanic searchers disembark from Le Seurat on August 8, 1985. On August 12th, Ballard and Michel join the American portion of the quest, the part that was supposed to be a photo opportunity with the found Titanic. The 245-foot Woods Hole ship Nor leaves dock from Ponta Delgado in the Azores. But first, Ballard has a top-secret commitment to the Navy to keep: the survey of the other sunken nuclear sub, the USS Scorpion, 400 miles southwest of the Azores.
North, approximately 75 meters.
The crew has been given clearances by the U.S. Navy, but the French scientists and the media aboard have not. Ballard has to be less than straightforward about his mission.
What I told them was that I had to do some tests for the Navy, that this was a Navy system and that they had to not come in our control room. And I thought they would catch me because the Scorpion's south of the Azores and Titanic's west. Well, I thought they'd look up and see where the sun was and say, you know, Bob, aren't we headed south? But they didn't.
With each of these sub-hunts, Ballard is learning more about how he might find Titanic. The Thresher has been completely blown apart, while the Scorpion was basically intact. Yet they have similar debris fields, ones that show up right away on Argo's cameras.
We pass this line. It's like just a line, that there's nothing and then there's everything. I mean, you come into a debris field.
It's a lesson Ballard will remember. In accordance with his agreement with the Navy, he's now free to do what he wishes with the rest of his time on this voyage. On August 24th, the Nor, packed with expectant French and American scientists and researchers, arrives near the area where the French search had left off. Argo's video cameras will prove or disprove Ballard's idea that video is a better search tool than sonar.
Bob just zigzagged up the eastern end of the survey area, gambling that if he did the zigzags tight enough, he would intersect the debris.
Quickly, though, the crew's morale plummets as days click by without a trace of the elusive wreck.
It was very, very tedious in a lot of ways. It was, frustrating. You really wanted to see something.
Day after day it was becoming very monotonous, very routine, not finding anything, just looking at mud, and an occasional fish would swim by, and people definitely were becoming disheartened. As I recall, people were sort of checking off the hours until we could head home.
August slips by. The crew is just 4 days away from their return date. It seems Titanic has evaded yet another determined and skilled search party. Then, just before 1 a.m. on September 1st, 1985, everything changes.
It was just another watch. We'd all been used to staring at black and white images of the deep sea floor, of a featureless deep sea floor for, watch after watch after watch. And in this watch, we started to pick up little objects here and there.
They weren't rocks, they weren't fish, they weren't sand waves, they were very angular bits of something. And as it turns out, as history will tell you, that what the first images were coming back up were of the boiler, with the very recognizable pattern of rivets in the face of the boiler.
God, this looks like a boiler! It's like a boiler! Yes, yes. Fantastic! All right! We're gonna nail this too!
There's no mistaking it. The object is an early 20th century coal-fired steamship boiler. It is past midnight. The crew aboard the Nor awakes.
Well, you just should have seen that boiler when it
We'll see. You didn't get excited, did you?
Okay. All right.
Of course, my first reaction was to roll over and go back to bed because the big joke on the trip had been, hey, wake up, we found the Titanic, you know.
Dr. Ballard rushed into the cabin, threw the door open, yelled, "We found it." I sat upright in my bunk and proceeded to put a crease in my forehead from the pipes overhead.
It was 2 o'clock. The Titanic sank at 2:20. And someone said, "Oh, Titanic's about to sink." And my mood just, boom, a wall switch. And we stopped and we went out on the fantail and we had a ceremony.
We had no connection to land, to people, to the history, but we knew that we were 2.5 miles directly above a very significant gravesite. You get a catch in your throat when that happens.
I said I found the Titanic. I didn't have a picture. So they were just waiting for me to say, let's go for it.
Once you find the boiler, now the next question is, what's the hull look like? Does it still look like the Titanic?
It's going to take more than technology to show the world the mysterious ship itself. It is going to take all the nerve they can muster. If Argo gets caught on the wreck, they are going to be left with nothing more than a multi-million-dollar anchor.
That is big. Oh, God, this looks like a boiler! It's like a boiler! Yes.
September 1st, 1985. After 73 long years in obscurity, a few persistent researchers and scientists become the first to gaze upon Titanic. But if the team from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution doesn't have any pictures of the ship itself, who will believe that they found Titanic? Maneuvering the sled, as the oceanographers call it, will not be easy given the effect of the currents rippling down Argo's 2.5-mile cable.
The analogy would be an airplane high in the sky, 12,000 feet up in the sky, trailing a little teeny camera, trying to find something pinpointed in a football field.
The most difficult thing to negotiate around will be the wires that supported Titanic's mighty smokestacks.
The good thing about that, you're not risking humans. There's no personnel involved, but the cost of the equipment is substantial, and it's a career breaker to lose some of this equipment in that manner.
The crew holds its breath.
Watch attention. Attention watch.
The stacks were gone. Thank God, the stacks were gone, and with it all the rigging. So I had a clean top. We had just done something that none of us had ever done before. And we knew we were at the edge of the technology. We pushed it to its limit, and we got out free.
And I remember those first passes with the Argo sled over the ship, and how absolutely thrilled we were that we immediately recognized what we were seeing. There it was. It wasn't a pile of scrap where maybe you could identify some of the pieces. I mean, we were looking at the Titanic.
That was cool. It's worth all the troubles and trials and tribulations. That run, I'll never forget those moments.
The ecstatic mood shifts to a somber one as the camera moves over the deck, especially the lifeboat supports. Here, Ida Strauss refused to leave her husband. The Navratil children said goodbye to their father, not knowing who would bring them home to their mother. Here, bandmaster Wallace Hartley led the band in lively ragtime tunes to keep the passengers calm until the final hymn, Nearer My God to Thee. As the crew stares at Argo's video feed, yet another punch in the stomach comes. They hope to find the Titanic in one piece, but at the middle of the ship, they keep finding a mass of confusing, twisted steel.
It's not a matter of simply making a quick turn and coming back around. That turn alone can take you 4 hours to make. We came back and made a run where we thought the stern would be, and there was nothing.
Key eyewitnesses on the night of the sinking, like Jack Thayer, were right after all. The two sections of the ship had broken apart between the third and fourth funnel and now lie 2,000 feet away from each other.
Jack Thayer made a series of sketches. One of these drawings shows the ship breaking in two at the ocean's surface. And it took another 75 or more years before a determination was made that the Titanic did break in two on the surface.
Just one day after these explorers find the ship, a raging storm blows in. To save the multi-million-dollar vehicle, it is brought back to the deck for the last time during this cruise on September 2nd, 1985. But the crew has another trick up its sleeve, the Acoustically Navigated Geological Underwater Survey, or ANGUS. This war horse is over 10 years old, and the crew was willing to risk losing it. Like Argo, Angus is dragged below the Nore, but instead of shooting video, it takes 35mm stills, photographs that can only be developed after it returns to the deck. And because it can't send a real-time video signal back to the ship, controlling this dope on a rope, as it is nicknamed, is much more difficult.
You know the location of the vehicle, and you know its distance off the bottom, and that's all you know. You don't know if it's about to fly into a cliff or if it's about to fly under some jagged piece of metal. So flying Angus was a real art.
Angus snaps thousands of pictures, including the world's first up-close look at the debris field. These everyday items bridge the years from 1912 to 1985 in a way no one could have predicted. The scientists and crew return to Woods Hole, happy to have proven their equipment worked, but not fully understanding the import of what they accomplished.
One of our friends had a brief radio conversation with people on the beach, and I'd asked him, I said, so did we make the newspapers? And he started laughing. He said, yeah, try the front page of every newspaper in the world.
For the most part, I think it was more or less out of people's consciousness until the discovery was made. And then, of course, it came rushing back into the world's consciousness.
But discovering the wreck was one thing. Dr. Robert Ballard and his team want to take a closer look at what happens to a ship during 3/4 of a century in the deep ocean. In order to do that, they are going to have to visit the Titanic, not from 2.5 miles above, but alongside the wreck, in person. The deck of the RMS Titanic, the scene of some of the most dramatic moments in maritime history. Here, families parted. Here, men were ordered out of lifeboats at gunpoint to make room for women and children. Here, hundreds prayed for mercy on their souls. For 73 years, it sat in darkness, until a team of scientists and engineers shine a light on it. Will someone dare tread on this deck once more? For the researchers at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, the chance to prove to the world and themselves that they can open up this strange environment proves irresistible.
There were a lot of issues that people wished to know more about, and certainly a lot of them were not scientific, but some of them were.
The Titanic was just a great destination to go to. It's something that you just couldn't leave behind.
It is several months after their discovery of Titanic in 1985. The researchers start to make preparations to document the site up close. The only way to do that is in a specialized submarine called a deep submergence vehicle, and Woods Hole just happens to operate one of the few in existence, the U.S. Navy-owned Alvin.
With a manned vehicle such as Alvin, you get to look out firsthand and see the things you would expect to see if you were really there yourself, which of course you are, versus the view that you get from a cable-controlled vehicle, which is a television view.
Though it can reach these great depths, Alvin has a maximum speed of just under 2 miles an hour. So while it makes far more sense to search for Titanic using unmanned vehicles that can stream through the water and stay down for days at a time, Alvin is the perfect vehicle to explore the wreck in person.
There is a lot of competition to be on the ship for the Titanic dive. There's a limited number of bunks on the boat. Seniority rules.
You pretty much had to earn the right to make it on that particular trip because we knew it was going to be very, very interesting. And it was.
The Woods Hole team wants to explore the interior of Titanic, but Alvin is too large to go inside safely. The U.S. Navy has already provided funds for Ballard to construct a small robotic probe to penetrate the torpedo tubes of the sunken nuclear sub, the USS Scorpion. Their goal, to try to examine the status of any live nuclear weapons which might still be on board.
Once we found the Titanic, it meant we could actually now explore it with this technology that we'd really developed for the Scorpion.
Ballard gives his team at the Deep Submergence Lab the go-ahead to start work on the tiny robot. They adapt key systems from a larger robot currently in blueprint stage called Jason. They dub the smaller robot Jason Jr. or JJ. The plan is to attach the probe to Alvin by a tether.
This vehicle was developed with the idea that it would allow the submarine to send a camera into areas and spaces that were hazardous or too small for the vehicle, for the submersible itself to go into.
Dr. Ballard came to us and said, I need a swimming eyeball. I need a robotic vehicle or a TV camera that I can put inside underwater wrecks.
We were to leave the next day for the Titanic, and we still hadn't ever had Jason Jr. on board Alvin and in the water and working.
The Woods Hole research vessel Atlantis II leaves on July 9, 1986, with the engineers still trying to make sure Jason Jr. will work in conjunction with Alvin. And just as in 1985, the Navy intends to share the technology for its covert operations. But this time, the plan is for the operations around the Titanic to take place first. Then, as the world is focusing on the results, the Navy will use the same equipment to further explore two of America's sunken nuclear submarines. July 12, 1986, the Woods Hole team returns to the satellite position they left nearly a full year before. By the next morning, they are ready to attempt their first dive with the submersible, with Jason tucked into its cage aboard Alvin. There's a heightened state of anxiety among the crew. Diving near a wreck in freezing water 2.5 miles under the ocean is not a routine task.
Cables are the things that can really bite you. If they get wrapped up in a prop or something snagged, then you've got a problem, because then you're anchored to the wreck.
Folks in 1912 put all their faith into this new technology to sail them from one side of the ocean to the other. Well, here we were, putting all our faith in another machine to transport us from the surface to the bottom and back again.
After all this time, someone will be paying this monument a visit. 8:30 a.m. ship time, July 13th, Dive 1. Alvin's crew is filled with both fear and expectation. The three men, Bob Ballard, pilot Ralph Hollis, and co-pilot Dudley Foster, settled in for their 2.5-hour descent.
Well, the first dive was sort of like the Titanic. Everything went wrong. As soon as we got in the water, everything just bellied up.
We started getting water leak indication in our batteries, which started cause a lot of concern, because when you get salt water mixed with lead acid batteries, it's a really bad thing.
Then we lost our sonar, so we're blind acoustically. So here we are on the bottom of the ocean. Somewhere around here is the Titanic.
We were sort of moving around the bottom blindly, you might say. We could only see about 40 feet. So it was sort of a surprise when we came up on it.
Went on forever. As we came up, it just went on and then faded out of sight.
By now, the leak in the batteries is critical, and the alarms are blaring.
Ralph said, we gotta go. We're flooding. And we punched out. We got 12 seconds, but there it was.
Alvin returns to the surface. engineers and technicians work through the night to make sure the same thing won't happen again. Due to their hard work, Dive 2 is a very different story.
I landed about 30 meters away, and then when we drove into it, it just filled the entire viewport. It was like driving up to a wall, a rusty wall.
When we went down and actually got a close look, all that was left of the pilot house almost was just the steering control module sticking up.
Gorgeous. Keep going.
Equipment problems plagued Jason Jr.'s engineers, but so far, no problem is life-threatening. Until July 24th, when everyone's worst fear comes true. The danger starts as Bob Ballard, Dudley Foster, and Martin Bowen send their robotic probe toward the ship's inner stairway.
I got a little adventurous with the robot at one point. We went down the boat deck, over the rail, toward the promenade deck. I realized that the tether had gotten pinched in a portion of the railing. So now I had to figure out, well, okay, now I've made an anchor for all three of us. And if I can't get this free, and if the explosive bolts don't go off, we're anchored here forever. What I did was turn the robot around, look at us, look at the catch point, and fly the robot on a path that would pull this out of the pinch point and allow the submersible to bring the tether back in. It was kind of automatic for me, but I think for the other two people in the submersible, it was kind of tense.
Got a lot of tether out.
In all, there are 12 different dives, most of them highly successful. But perhaps the highlight of the entire cruise is Dive 3, when Martin Bowen maneuvers JJ down Titanic's first-class grand staircase.
That was really spooky because it's just this giant hole up on the top, and I had to set the sub on the deck there and move ahead far enough for JJ to go straight down.
Amazingly, they find a crystal lighting fixture hanging almost as though the violence of April 15th, 1912 never happened.
To see this sort of crystalline light fixture was one of the things that really made it a personal experience to me, that those human sort of artifacts, that gives you the connection.
I felt like I was dancing in the ballroom. It was a culmination of everything. I mean, the 86 expedition was a celebration. I mean, it was over.
In the absence of more testing or hard science to do here, the Woods Hole team leaves for home on July 24th, 1986.
Everyone was fixated on my Titanic expedition. They didn't know that right after we did Titanic, the ship left again. It left with Alvin, left with Jason Jr., and went and did the Scorpion. And the Thresher, and the press never caught it.
In recently declassified footage, we see Jason Jr. specially reconfigured to fit through the Scorpion's missile tubes, the better to examine the status of the nuclear weapons on board. Even as the Navy does its investigations at the submarines, Woods Hole technicians are back in their labs, sifting through the data they compiled on their mission. One key document is this mosaic, created from 100 images selected from the over 57,000 shots taken by the still camera device Angus in 1986. It gives a view impossible to capture any other way because there's no way to illuminate the massive structure in the inky darkness of its 12,500-foot depth.
The whole scenario of Titanic's loss, the nature of the damage that she suffered from the iceberg, all of that has been rewritten as a result of the expeditions.
With their duties at Titanic over, the scientists and engineers from Woods Hole take what they've learned from their equipment tests on Titanic and start building the next generation of deep-sea robots and imaging systems. The visit to Titanic marks a high point in the careers of the team members, but it also leaves another kind of mark.
We wanted to commemorate the sinking, and we took bronze plaques down, one on the bow, one on the stern, hoping that people would leave the ship alone. And that was our hope.
But the lure of this legendary ship is too great. In just 1 year, a submersible similar to Alvin, using similar robotic arms, arrives on the site, not to leave plaques, but to bring pieces of the Titanic home. Was it for this purpose that science had found the wreck? By the autumn of 1986, Titanic's location is no longer a secret, but it still holds many mysteries and, as it turns out, many artifacts, objects that people around the world are interested in seeing for themselves. With little more hard science to do here, the researchers at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution are done with the site. There is some fear that others will disturb the Titanic in its resting place, perhaps even to raise the wreck. Since only a handful of submarines are capable of diving to Titanic's depth in 1986, the notion is not taken seriously. But Titanic has a way of making people ignore technological obstacles. It is now just 1 year later, 1987. Ifremer, the French Oceanographic Institute, is at the Titanic site with their $20 million submersible, Nautile. Their goal is to collect relics in conjunction with a for-profit company funded by international investors. In this expedition, some 1,800 artifacts are brought back to land.
Ifremer was involved right from the beginning, as they were the co-discoverers on the 1985 expedition. They actually felt an obligation to protect the future expeditions to the wreck.
Some of the people involved in locating Titanic become critics of salvaging.
I'm not so sure that the recovery that's taken place has really served a historical or archaeological purpose.
I mean, they've basically taken the jewels off of the old lady in her grave. But the old lady's still down there.
We know all there is to know about that era, and we don't need to have a dish in front of us or a pair of shoes to describe it. So it's a sense of discriminating responsibility. I'm not an expert, but I won't contribute to it personally.
Individually, that might just be a teacup in that showcase. But when I place the teacup in juxtaposition with a plate and a knife and a fork, and then I start seeing other things from first class or third class, and I begin to paint the picture of what life was on board, that's the true magic of the artifacts.
On the 1987 expedition, the French robot Robin, a counterpart to Woods Hole's Jason Jr., also makes some spectacular trips inside the wreck, but not to pick up artifacts.
We would love to go inside and recover artifacts. We don't currently have the technology to do so because we can fly a camera inside. We have no ability to be able to put arms or retrieval methods on something small enough to go inside the wreck.
The salvage company goes public in 1993 under the name RMS Titanic Incorporated. Artifacts like the ship's tritone whistle, the largest ever built, are placed on traveling exhibit. 10 million people from London, England to Santiago, Chile attend, and many historians and museums warm up to the idea of artifact retrieval. The idea of studying the captain's megaphone or any of the other 6,000 items brought back since 1987 has a power of its own.
My personal favorite artifact, which I personally picked up in 1994, was 1.5 children's marbles.
I couldn't help but be touched by the recollection of a tiny little person, a young person, whose hopes and dreams for the future were so tragically cut short that night.
Another startling item is this bag found to have been owned by perfume salesman Adolf Safeld. This case includes tubes that still contain the oil from which perfumes are made.
We conduct extensive research.
In 1994, RMS Titanic Incorporated is named salvor in possession of the Titanic by a federal judge.
We made representations there in that courtroom that we had that wreck by virtue of the fact we had an artifact from the wreck, and we wished to arrest it and therefore qualify as right of salvor in possession.
As a matter of fact, I recall Judge Clark saying that we don't want people fighting over this ship out in international waters and possibly killing each other.
The subject of salvaging and exploring the Titanic enters public consciousness in a big way in 1997 with James Cameron's blockbuster feature film. The plot of the film is triggered by a salvager played by Bill Paxton, who is looking for a priceless jewel thought to have been lost with the ship. The shot of the twin submersibles, the Russian-owned Mir 1 and Mir 2 at the very beginning of the film, is an indelible image.
And when that opening scene came out where the two submarines fly in over the bow, I'd done that same thing. I did that for real. I wanted to stand up in the theater and say that.
In 1996, the RMS Titanic Company announces their intention to bring back 26 feet of Titanic's 883-foot hull. Up until this point, lumps of coal, cups and saucers, and other small items have been retrieved and carefully restored. Is the effort to raise a piece of the ship itself an act of grave robbing, as some suggest? Or will the Titanic be brought home after 84 years at sea? The long-held dream of raising the RMS Titanic is a practical impossibility, but that does not prevent people from attempting a symbolic raising, as new technology allows salvagers to retrieve larger and larger pieces of this once remarkable ocean liner. In 1993, the salvors in possession, RMS Titanic Incorporated, identify a piece of the hull that could possibly be raised. The idea renews some of the debate touched off when artifacts began being retrieved in 1987.
I think taking things out of context destroys the context. And I knew how powerful it was to be at the Titanic.
The big piece, as it is dubbed, is made of steel 1 to 3 inches thick. The method for raising this dense chunk of metal harkens back to the many early schemes to raise the Titanic. Lighter-than-water diesel-filled bags.
You can agonize for hours over some convoluted retrieval process. And to fill a large bag with diesel fuel and drop it to the seabed, attach the piece and recover it, is obviously, in hindsight, the most simple way of doing it.
In 1996, to much media attention, a French and American team attaches 8 bags, each filled with 5,000 gallons of diesel fuel. The piece makes the long journey, taking the reverse trip that it made 84 years before. But a hurricane is on its way, and as the salvagers start to pull the piece home, there's a problem.
The team were unlucky, and sadly, some 30 feet from the surface, the big piece actually was let go and cascaded back to the seabed.
The section of sea deck cabins 79 and 81 makes its way to the bottom for the second time. 1998, the RMS team takes another shot at the big piece. A beacon placed there 2 years earlier brings the team right to the spot, but will they be any more successful this time? After a half-hour ascent, the balloons peak above the waves. Finally, a bona fide section of the Titanic, albeit just 20 out of its 46,000 tons, does what the doomed ship could not. After 86 long years at sea, the fabled craft symbolically completes its maiden journey. It arrives safely in America. A ceremony is held as it comes into Boston Harbor on August 21st, 1998.
As impressive as any of the objects may be, there is no one that can look at the big piece and not feel the presence of Titanic.
With artifact retrieval more or less a fact of life, there are some that still argue that a whole Titanic at the bottom of the ocean, presented on video or film, is more compelling than a warehouse full of artifacts.
At Woods Hole, our feeling was that there was a certain amount of emotion that to be gained by looking at the Titanic where it lies on the bottom and treating it as a memorial, not to recover any artifacts.
I've always had a vision of I want to create underwater museums through telepresence. The key is you want to go to the place where the history was acted out.
Filmmakers and especially science photographers have identified high-definition video as the most important advancement in underwater imaging to come along in a generation. HD TV is a widescreen super sharp format with 2 million pixels of picture information versus 210,000 pixels for regular TV. Here, Woods Hole specialists are testing camera technology that would have been impossible to imagine when they were first taking pictures of Titanic.
It was an opportunity to image some parts of the wreck that we had been imaging since 1985 and try to collect some imagery that could actually look and see if the wreck has been changed at all in the 10, 15 years that we have an image database for.
They mount their cameras on the outside of a Russian-owned Mir submersible and take the plunge. Since these $25 million subs are available for hire, they have become a convenient way for all kinds of people, from scientists to tourists, to visit Titanic. The exercise will prove that their state-of-the-art cameras work under the extreme pressures at 12,500 feet and better compensate for the darkness and silt that gets stirred up when a submersible visits the deep ocean. This technology will bring back sharper than ever images of everything from other shipwrecks to previously undiscovered underwater geology and animals. Who knows what new knowledge will be revealed? Scientists hope they will even uncover clues to the origins of life.
You collect everything you can on that image in the greatest amount of detail and resolution that you possibly can without any concern. Well, you're certainly concerned, but you're certainly not aware of what it is a scientist might be looking for in the future.
But no matter how good the images get, people will always want a first-hand look at this monument to history. No one knows for sure how long it will be until Titanic becomes one with the ocean floor. The prospect of crowds of tourists smashing into the delicate wreck site leaves some wondering, has underwater technology gone too far?
It's been there 90 years. It's being rusted away in places. And there's some evidence the superstructure is very frail.
The rustical bacteria have a special fondness for the rivets holding the plates to the ribs of the ship. And so quite likely the ship is eventually going to be collapsing, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years.
There are a number of organizations now who do obviously visit the wreck. The amount of activity down there, we believe, will not adversely affect the wreck at all.
I don't think that any activity could damage the Titanic more than time is doing by itself.
What is certain is that even after 90 years, people continue to want something from Titanic. Some have invested fortunes. Some have put their reputations, even their lives, on the line. But Titanic has given a lot in return, helping science to advance underwater technology and open up the extraordinary world of the ocean for all. And it's still doing so.
On the cruises we did in 2001, it was very interesting to compare looking at the high-def image inside the sphere of the submersible with the viewport view. The human eye has a lot more depth of field than the HD camera systems do right now, and that's something we're going to try to improve.
I might want to sneak back, but I don't think I want to go back with a big brass band. I'm afraid that if I go back, I'll be very disappointed, because my museum that I have in my mind won't be there.
I don't know what it is about the Titanic. That ship just won't sink. It won't stay as a grave. There's other shipwrecks that more people perished on.
Whether you're a little girl, a little boy, a man or a woman, the Titanic seems to find a magic button in you, and it's not the same button in each person. So it sort of puts out a chord of music, and in that touches all the buttons.
From the early black and white images, to the clarity of high definition, to the remarkable technology that can touch the past, we remain drawn to the ongoing story of Titanic. It continues to be written by those dedicated to exploration. The site itself remains a memorial to those who died, guilty only of having too much faith in technology.